Hello and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kendra Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Today we have Mary Jo. Mary Jo has a bomb drop of November 22nd, 2021, a date of marriage of 2005, and she has a boomerang who is a low energy wallower. She says everything he did was online. One woman agreed to move in with him if he left his wife, me. And so he did. But she never showed up. He finally figured out he was being catfished and he wants to come home. He wants to return. But his MLC is not over. What boundaries are important to have in place to deal with this situation? So when you say he wants to return, or have you then said, okay, yes, and you're wondering what boundaries to have in place because he is moving home? Or are you wondering what boundaries in place when he wants to return, and part of that is, should I allow him to move home or not? So that's your first piece. One of the things I did was I set up a return home contract. The next thing I did was accept that he wasn't going to have the same idea of that as I would. Contracts are meaningless to MLCers, but I still think it's an important idea to put out there and go over. Here are my expectations, and here are my rules. Because when you have a contract, people may not follow it, but there are consequences. And this is whether that contract is legal or not. So I created the contract, and some of the things I did were stipulate. I agree that I did these things, and then I had little initials at each point. I agree that I hurt this person. I agree, and then I had it written out. So those weren't the rule parts. Those are just agreeing to the history. But some of the things that should be on that are counseling. Therapy for both of you. Do you think he needs to go to therapy alone? Or do you think it would be better to go for both of you because sometimes individual therapists, they hear one side and they steer them out of the marriage? That's always a risk. So marriage counseling, hopefully that marriage counseling can incorporate everything else. Other boundaries. Of course, the boundaries are you're not supposed to talk to other women unless it's somebody I know, somebody I found is trustworthy, your sister, your aunt, these sort of things. That might change later on when he becomes more trustworthy and you feel safe with him having communication with a woman who you never thought was a threat, but he's in a vulnerable position. And so because sometimes women are threatened, you don't know it. So we're scared right now. So he needs to have boundaries for himself when dealing with other women. And those need to be something that you include. You could include some sort of post-nuptial contract. I don't necessarily say you should, but that's an idea. Now, do you need a boundary for him to move home? Such as, okay, before you move home, we need to do these things. You need to make these, have hit these mile markers. We need to go to counseling. We need to go for at least this long, and then we'll get some advice from the counselor and take their advice on how to proceed with that as well. You need to have done maybe these other things, and it might differ in each situation. So this is why I'm not outlining it. There are things that he's not going to do. There's things that he's going to resist, and some of the resistance is going to tell you he's not ready. And remember, you said he's still an MLC. You can be ready for certain parts of the recovery and still an MLC. MLC is return broken, especially when you have a close contactor. So he's a boomerang. And does he want to return home because he's defeated? I do not think you need to say, no, I'm not having you come home because you're coming home not because you want to be with me, but because I'm just there. I'm available. I'm your second, second option. I don't think that's a reason to say he shouldn't come home. I don't think it's a reason that you can put that out there. But I think it's more about you're coming home with the idea that, yes, I understand that you may not be coming home because you wanted to be with me. You're coming home because it's a safe place and you feel that I'm available and I would like you here. But one of the things that is our goal in therapy is that we work toward The reason for being together is because we want to be together, not because it's just better than what else is out there. And so he needs to agree that and understand, I may not want it now, but would you like to want that? Would it be better for your life? I'm not asking if you think you can, because they're like, I just don't think that's possible. Okay, but that wasn't the question. We're not asking about possible. We're not asking about probable, because it is possible and probable. But when you're depressed, you don't believe that. I'm just asking, if there were a miracle cure, would that be something you would want on that list of miracles? That I want to be here with my wife. I'm with her, but I wish that I had joy and happiness in that relationship, because we're going to make that a goal then. It needs to be a goal. That is part of our purpose of being together, that we can be choosing joy together. And so those aren't all boundaries. You have to have some official rule boundaries of no other women. And then you have some consequences if I hear you doing these things. Some of it will be in the context of the counseling. Because why is he being catfished? Catfishing and being catfished is different than having an alienator that is a limerent affair partner where it's a two-way affair. In my situation, it was a two-way affair, and she was trying to steal him, and she was trying to manipulate him away. She wasn't trying to get his money. She let him live with her for free because she wanted him, not his money, which she didn't have anyway. So there's a different kind of vulnerability that might need some counseling and to find out what is it that helps somebody or enables somebody to that vulnerability with another person, where they're so willing to drop that trust and go after that other person. So that might be an additional level of therapy. I don't know. But in that, if you saw that he suddenly was talking to another person, it may or may not be the same boundary line as it would have been for me. The boundary line for me is, I discover that you are talking to her again, seeing her again, whatever. You're not allowed to live here. You're out. Hard line in the sand. Whereas for you, it might be more a sign of something within his pathology of he fell off the wagon with alcohol and he made a big mistake and talked to the therapist before applying the next level consequence. I don't know. What I would do is I would go to the therapist and talk to them about helping you with what those boundaries need to be in your situation. Because the catfishing does reveal some different vulnerabilities that may be really important to be specific about for you. No calling other women. How about when you need to discuss your feelings of hurt and betrayal? Do you need a safe environment for doing that? How do you help him feel safe with your pain? In the beginning, that might be only in the structure of the counselor's environment where you have that other person. And maybe you should only, and again, discuss this with the counselor because each situation is different. Sometimes you're safest when we're going to talk about the things that are hurting me only during this set period. Maybe it's once every day or once a week that you do it without the counselor, but maybe it's in the beginning, it might only be in the counseling office. Then your spouse can feel safe that they're not going to be hammered with it every day. Where were you? What were you doing on this date 3 years ago? And I'm so bothered by it and I'm so triggered. But also I want your counselor to explain triggers so that they do understand. If you get triggered, you're out and about and you get triggered with him, you might break the rules and start hammering him. So I want somebody who is going to be helping you with counseling and training each of you about the healing of the other so that there's some understanding. But the boundaries, there are the general ones. But in each situation, you need to talk to your counselor about what specific ones you need for you. Because if he's already home or you've already agreed to let him come home and that's happening, they will be different than if you're trying to determine how to let him come home. If he has not and you haven't given him an answer about returning home, what is his situation right now? I have nowhere to go. It's a good time to set up a boundary and say, you know what, I really want you here, but no, I need to see some changes in you before I feel safe letting you back in. But I really do want you. I want the reassurance of it on all sides. There are some things that have to be done first. But I don't have anywhere to go. And you're going to have to figure that out. If you can keep yourselves in separate residences, that's a really good way to go right now. If not, then you deal with what you have. Because it's very common that you just let them come home. I did it, 8 times, so I get it. And counseling. And if you can get somebody, I often recommend EFT for emotionally focused therapy that is based on affair recovery. I'm really interested in if you can go talk to people and see if there are any recommendations for somebody who specializes, has experience in dealing with infidelity that is due to catfishing, or having helped people who have been catfished and overcoming that. Because that's probably a very special niche, but it's a really important one. Okay? I hope this is helpful, and I will see everybody in the next question.